with a keen longing to realize him. From that time, his life was undergoing a marvelous change. His one overwhelming passion and aim of life was to live for God and God alone. God's powerful name was indelibly stamped on his tongue. Now it was that he was becoming conscious of a divine influence working silently but irresistibly in him, gradually dominating and possessing him. Now it was that he was becoming conscious of a divine influence working silently but irresistibly in him, gradually dominating and possessing him. He felt an awakening within the very core of his being. With steady steps and unflagging zeal, he now entered upon a path of rigorous self-discipline. The trials and hardships of the path did not daunt him. Repeated appeals, persuasions, remonstrances could not make him swerve an inch from this path. He was calm, earnest, determined. As time passed in prayer, fasting, and repetition of God's name, the consciousness of divine possession and guidance assumed such a predominance that at last the divine voice within him drove him forth from Mangalore to the wide world. In these words, he is portraying before us the steps. In 1920, he started, here he is in 1921. He first fired Ramdas's bosom with a keen longing to realize him. From that time, his life was undergoing a marvelous change. His one overwhelming passion and aim of life was to live for God and God alone. God's powerful name was indelibly stamped on his tongue. Now it was that he was becoming conscious of a divine influence working silently but irresistibly in him, gradually dominating and possessing him. Step by step, He felt an awakening within the core of his being. With steady steps and unflagging zeal, he now entered upon a path of rigorous self-discipline. The trials and hardships of the path did not daunt him. Repeated appeals, persuasions, remonstrances could not make him swerve an inch from this path. He was calm, earnest, determined. As time passed in prayer, fasting, repetition of God's name, the consciousness of divine possession and guidance assumed such a predominance that at last the divine voice within him drove him forth from Mangalore into the wide world. What was his condition at this momentous hour? He was a dazed and helpless creature, caught in the grip of an all-powerful being. He did not know what he was doing. He was under the full control of an almighty power, without any offer of resistance on his part, just as a baby in the hands of its mother. Verily, it was God alone who held him, a God who is at once his divine mother and master, so real, loving, kind, and good. Blessed indeed is the day when God made Ramdas entirely his own. O Mother and Master Divine, all glory to thee. How tenderly he nursed and guided his newborn offspring during his first year's itinerant life all over India forms the theme of In Quest of God. How tenderly he nursed and guided his newborn offspring during his first year's itinerant life all over India forms the theme of In Quest of God. During that period, what was his mental state, manner of life, outlook upon the world? His mind was merged in a unique stillness of peace. His life was one of unreserved self-surrender. And as regards the world, in a sense, it was not there for him. That is, he was dead, as it were, to the world. He was traveling from place to place like an automaton, as if in a dream. Indifferent to, nay, unconscious of his body and environments. All through it, God, to whom he had surrendered up his life, was mysteriously influencing his movements and controlling and taking care of him in every way. It was really an entire dedication on one side and a watchful, benevolent protection on the other. He experienced that he was living and moving in a new world in which he felt there was none other than himself and his great master Ram, his all in all. In this wonderful vision of inexpressible ecstasy and peace, he struggled to dwell always. This exalted consciousness, possessing as it did the characteristic of perfect vacancy or emptiness, was filled with an ineffable rapture of peace, silence, repose. The dual throng, pleasure and pain, good and evil, cold and heat, etc., relating to the physical body, affected him not. For his mind was not there to take note of these sensations. It would always be in tune with the infinite spirit of stillness and peace. There were occasions when, under certain conditions,
Swamiji, this stillness, the opposites of pleasure, pain, please explain. This
Stillness opposite. You explain stillness.
stillness,
Explain. You explain. Opposites.
Pairs of opposites are to be explained.
stillness, how can you explain? Because any explanation is a disturbance on the stillness. But since we have got only one vehicle called the mind, the thought, we try to understand stillness, the absence of thought, with the thought to some extent. A waveless ocean.
there be waveless ocean?
There will not be. Ocean is always full of waves. But
Yes.
you just imagine how it would be a waveless ocean. That means relatively waveless. Suppose you go to the beach, not during monsoon period, then you will find some ripples on the surface, not waves.
Correct, in the center of the sea.
But during the monsoon period, there will be a roaring, thundering waves.
Yes.
It will be going up 6 feet, 7 feet, 10 feet up. But during the non-monsoon time, when you go there and sit and watch without talking, we will see small ripples, small. And then we tried.
Common quiet sea.
Then we only up to that we can go. Then our mind will be able to infer a state where there are no waves at all. It cannot be explained. The moment you explain, there is a disturbance.
Yes, yes.
Or in another way,
Buddha's story, Swamiji. Buddha wanted water to drink.
Ram doesn't speak.
No, in the depth, the ocean, then it is still not Swamiji, in the depth.
suppose when you draw a line on the water, surface water, there will be some ripples for a few seconds or a fraction of a second. And then what happens? Without leaving any dent, it levels itself. That stillness, we can capture that stillness. We disturb it for a second, then the ordinary water, we may not be able to understand. You disturb it and then see the disturbance settling down, and then what remains? It is exactly like us. We have been told through Shastras and revelations of Mahatmas, through their words of wisdom, that we are that waveless ocean. We are that peace itself. But because of thought waves, we are not aware of the stillness as the base. One thought wave takes to another thought wave, and in that process we hardly believe that there is stillness as the bottom. That is why they have recommended that stillness is the outcome of stilling the mind. Stilling the mind means stilling the thoughts. How are we to still the thoughts? We cannot still the thoughts. So we make use of the Nama chanting as a tool. That is also a disturbance. But as a tool which drives away all other dissimilar disturbances, and then finally it also disappears. Here, even deep sleep state also, there is no thought. But there we do not know who we are. Here we become aware who we are. That means the consciousness absolute, the awareness absolute. So it cannot be brought within the ambit of knowable, but our mind can do some digging and inferences. It can lead. It could be. And rest, when we do that, we become the experiencer. If the mind is restless to that extent, probably through devotion also we can attain. Anyhow, let us complete this and come back. We are not going to read the whole thing. After some place again we will come back, because it's very, 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 when our mind says we have gone through in quest of God once or twice or thrice or 4 times, still we know very well that there are many, many things to be unearthed. So with that perspective, when we took up this in the vision of God, suddenly he repeats the whole thing. So let us see how. It is very interesting. The trials and hardships of the path did not daunt him. He was calm, earnest, determined. As time passed in prayer, fasting, and repetition of God's name, the consciousness of the divine possession, this is very important, and guidance assumed such a predominance that at last the divine voice within him drove him forth from Mangalore into the wide world. That was on the 27th December.
Oh.
We are hearing Papa's own words, after some time, about the whole thing in a retrospect, flashback. What was his condition at this momentous hour? He was a dazed and helpless creature, caught in the grip of an all-powerful being. He did not know what he was doing. He was under the full control of an almighty power, without any offer of resistance on his part, just as a baby in the hands of its mother. Verily, it was God alone who held him, a God who is at once his divine mother and master, so real, so loving, so kind, and so good. Papa is not, feeling contented. That's why he keeps on adding one or two, not one adjective, Blessed indeed is the day when God made Ramdas entirely his own. Every day we are praying, make me thine and thine only, forever and ever. God made Ramdas entirely his own. O Mother and Master Divine, all glory to thee. How tenderly he nursed and guided his newborn offspring during his first year's itinerant life all over India forms the theme of In Quest of God. During that period, what was his mental state, manner of life, and outlook upon the world? His mind was merged in a unique stillness of peace. His life was one of unreserved self-surrender. And as regards the world, in a sense, it was not there for him, that he was dead, as it were, to the world. He was traveling from place to place like an automaton, as if in a dream, indifferent to, nay, unconscious of, his body and environments. All through it, God, to whom he has surrendered up his life, was mysteriously influencing his movements and controlling and taking care of him in every way. It was really an entire dedication on one side and one watchful, benevolent protection on the other. He experienced that he was living and moving in a new world in which he felt there was none other than himself and his great master Ram, his all in all. This is very important for us to understand. To understand in quest of God, this word, is very, very important. There was nobody else except these two. He and his master Ram. He and his master Ram, not only as the indwelling spirit, prompting him, motivating him, guiding him, stopping him, making him to proceed, that was on one side. And the entire creation. So only Ram was there. Ram was either in the form of a indwelling reality or in the form of a all-pervading reality.
Swamiji,
Huh?
so everything was one only, inside out.
Yes. At the same time, retaining his sense of individuality. That is the mystic relationship. Retaining his sense of individuality, otherwise who will explain? This is beyond the rational views. In this wonderful vision of inexpressible ecstasy and peace, he struggled to dwell always. This exalted consciousness, possessing as it did the characteristic of perfect vacancy or emptiness, was filled with an ineffable rapture of peace, silence, and repose. The dual throng, pleasure and pain, good and evil, cold and heat, etc., relating to the physical body, affected him not. For his mind was not there to take note of these sensations. It would always be in tune with the infinite spirit of stillness and peace. There were occasions when, under certain conditions, he would be dragged down with a jerk, as it were, to the sense of the old world and its association. But he would be instantly pulled up by that silent and watchful spirit within. In those days, Ramdas's haunts were caves, jungles, ruins, riversides, graveyards, hills, cremation grounds. It appeared that these places exerted on him a strange fascination. Instinctively, he avoided the din and bustle of the city life and was unconsciously led away from it to dreadful solitudes. The sense of fear had vanished from him entirely. Danger and death had lost their terrors for him. A feeling of perfect assurance, security, and protection was ever with him. A feeling of perfect assurance, security, and protection was ever with him. The powerful Ramamantram never left his lips. He was uttering like a machine. It has been revealed in Quest of God how miraculously he was more than once saved from terrible situations. It seemed as if God had taken him up for his experiments. To mold, to transform, to manipulate him as he willed. A wax lump in his dexterous hands. Some friends of northern India who had met him during his first year's wandering life declared that they observed him as having been possessed by extreme dispassion. He was indifferent alike to his body and to the external world, and was found absorbed solely in Ramsmaran or God remembrance. He was also discovered to be like a child, passive, docile, obedient. He was bathed, clothed, fed, led in all things. In fact, he had neither attraction nor repulsion for the world. His attitude towards it was simply inexpressible, for he felt, in fact, nothing to interest him in the world, and curiously, he had none. It was simply a wonderful state. Even intellect and emotion seemed to have ceased to function. Intellect and emotion. Mind and intellect. No? Truly, God by his power had eradicated from his heart the false, self-asserting ego and was working himself in its place. The one great power who causes both the internal and external movements in this world of phenomena. At this period, Ramdas scarcely talked. He was perfectly fearless. Love and hate, like and dislike, conveyed no meaning for him. In fact, in brief, he could be likened to a dry leaf, tossed at random as the wind of divine will listed. It was thus that he was guided back by God to Mangalore after a year's absence. Though we have technically covered In Quest of God, the text, Papa still knew, or Ram still knew, that we have not captured the essence. That is why, having explained everything through the text, today he now chose to reveal the essence. So, what are they? Please share.
Swamiji, Swamiji, my humble opinion, the outpouring, in outpouring, one prayer, that is dialogue, which is very useful, I think, and very easy. It's not easy, but simply pray to Ram, make me thy mad, make me your mad, like that. Pray, everything will be over. One thing is every thing. That one prayer, make me your mad. Or we should ask God, make us give madness on him. So is it okay, Swamiji? Because of madness only, the saints and all has come like that. Man, God, and
Okay.
madness.
We are now going through Papa's own revelations about his 1 year life. That is what we are now reading.
Correct.
So if we ponder over deeply, probably some more clarity will come to us about the essence of the text. That is what we are reviewing.
Correct.
So what we have been reading it now, you just think and tell us what stands out in your mind from the readings.
The same thing, because he was made of Ram, everything has come. Because Ram made him, Ramdas is made. So everything he went to so many things that developed. So that is my reason.
Okay. Okay, let us see whether any other thoughts are coming.
It's so much.
That is the most important one. Ram took him, possessed, replaced his ego, sat there, so that there was only two. The sense of individuality, Ramdas, and the indwelling and all-pervading reality, Ram.
Swamiji,
Ram
is father, mother, brother, friend, preceptor, knowledge, fame, wealth, all. And so, when Ram is like that in Papa, every soul is likened to Papa. So everybody should be like Papa, feel in the particular individual, be he or she or child, it should be that, from within, the aspiration should come, as Papa. That is the sole quintessence of IQ.
Yes.
Whether in pressure or pain, whatever it is. The prayer should be from within, of the self.
Rest of the people are keeping quiet.
No, Swamiji, absorbing, finding it difficult.
Swamiji, inner what repeat panna, Swamiji.
No.
Inner what?
It was in the year by the command of the Almighty Lord by the command of the Almighty Lord, Ramdas, his child, undertakes the task of continuing the story of his experiences from the time and place where he broke off at the end of his first book, In Quest of God. The narrative of the In Quest of God extends over to 1 year's life after the great change came upon him. The purpose of the present book is to draw further the thread of the same narrative, and it contains an account of his later experiences in the course of 9 years that have elapsed. Before proceeding with the story, it would be necessary for him to place before the reader a brief summary mainly concerning his spiritual struggle and evolution during the first year, so that it might bring out in a proper perspective the later experiences chronicled in this book, namely in the Vision of God. It was in the year 1921 in Mangalore that the all-merciful Lord of the universe first fired Ramdas's bosom with a keen longing to realize him. From that time, his life was undergoing a marvelous change. His one overwhelming passion and aim of life was to live for God and God alone. God's powerful name was indelibly stamped on his tongue. Now it was that he was becoming conscious of a divine influence, working silently but irresistibly in him, gradually dominating and possessing him. The longing, because it was intense, now that he was becoming conscious of a divine influence, working silently but irresistibly in him, gradually dominating and possessing him, he felt an awakening within the very core of his being. Awakening to the realization, no? I must hold him, no? I must become one with him. With steady steps and unflagging zeal, he now entered upon a path of rigorous self-discipline. Not merely aspiration, no? He was blessed with the awareness of that power influencing him, you know, and he got awakened. And then followed the discipline, self-discipline. Trials and hardships on the path did not daunt him. First chapter, no? Repeated appeals, persuasions, remonstrances could not make him swerve an inch from this path. He was calm, earnest, determined. As time passed in prayer, fasting, and repetition of God's name, the consciousness of divine possession and guidance assumed such a predominance that at last the divine force within him drove him forth from Mangalore into the wide world. Not that he started, but he was driven, no? The divine voice within him drove him forth. What was his condition at this momentous hour? He was a dazed and helpless creature, caught in the grip of an all-powerful being. He did not know what he was doing. He was under the full control of an almighty power, without any offer of resistance on his part, just as a baby in the hands of its mother. Verily, it was God alone who held him. Not that he held God, no. By doing sadhana, we are trying to hold him, no. That is why we have not succeeded. Verily, it was God alone who held him. A God who is at once his divine mother and master. So real, loving, kind and good. Blessed indeed is the day when God made Ramdas entirely his own. O Mother and Master Divine, all glory to thee. How tenderly he nursed and guided his newborn offspring during his first year's itinerant life all over India forms the theme of In Quest of God. So how he nursed, how tenderly he nursed and guided his newborn offspring. So our whole perspective needs to be altered, During that period, what was his mental state, manner of life, outlook upon the world? His mind was merged in a unique stillness of peace. His life was one of unreserved self-surrender. And as regards the world, in a sense, it was not there for him. That is, he was dead as it were to the world. He was traveling from place to place like an automaton as if in a dream, indifferent to, unconscious of his body and environments. All through it, God to whom he had surrendered up his life was mysteriously influencing his movements and controlling and taking care of him in every way. It was really an entire dedication on one side and a watchful, benevolent protection on the other. He experienced that he was living and moving in a new world in which he felt there was none other than himself and his great master Ram, his all in all. In this wonderful vision of inexpressible ecstasy and peace, he struggled to dwell always. This exalted consciousness, possessing as it did the characteristic of perfect vacancy or emptiness, was filled with an ineffable rapture of peace, silence, and repose. The dual throng, pressure and pain, good and evil, cold and heat, relating to the physical body, affected him not. For his mind was not there to take note of these sensations. It would always be in tune with the infinite spirit of stillness and peace. That is why he felt unperturbed,
Swamiji, this is becoming very difficult to comprehend because a person who is living in the world, walking in the world and not experiencing the opposite, it's very difficult to understand. Only patients in coma will be like that.
Quite right. At the same time, we should know he was not inside the room. He was very much with the world. God subjected him through varying experiences. It was not merely in solitude. He was very much with the moving world. So are we right in telling that this is he was he was he was away from the world? Yes, mentally he was away from the world. But physically he was very much with the world.
Swamiji,
Please think about it.
Swamiji, interest of God, ஃபைனலா அப்பப்பா அந்த serene and calm அந்த ஸ்டேட் வரதுக்கு அந்த அப்புறம் அந்த எக்ஸ்பீரியன்ஸ் தான் இப்போ சுவாமி நீங்க படிச்சது எல்லாமே. ஸோ அப்போ வந்து அந்த காம் அண்ட் செரீன் ஸ்டேட் அது வரும்போது தான் இந்த இந்த பிளிஸ் நம்மளால ஒரு எக்ஸ்பிரஸ் பண்ற அந்த ஒரு இது புரியுது. ஆனா நம்ம அதை எப்படி சுவாமி சொல்றது
அப்படின்னு நினச்சிட்டு இருந்தோம். இப்போ புரியறது முதல்லேருந்தே இந்த காம்னஸ் அண்ட் பீஸ் அவர்கிட்ட இருக்குன்னு. நம்ம நினச்சிட்டு இருந்தோம் அந்த எக்ஸ்பீரியன்ஸுக்கு அப்புறம் he was serene, calm. But now he himself has written this, His mind, the dual throng, pleasure and pain, good and evil, cold and heat, relating to the physical body affected him not.
Now it explains why throughout the interest of God he was so very aloof from the world and being in the world.
He was very much with the world. Relating to the physical body affected him, for his mind was not there to take note of these sensations. It would always be in tune with the infinite spirit of stillness and peace. That is why when he was left in Erode station, he was not perturbed. That is why when he got down at Trichy station, he was not perturbed. Like that we keep on listing,
Yes, Swamiji. So now we have to go back and read the entire interest of God with this perspective.
Yeah. He himself has written, this is the introduction he gives to In the Vision of God. Because after going through all these things, we may form so many concepts. So in order to clear that, he prompted us to now go through this. Not that we are changing the whole perspective, there is definitely a change of perspective. As now somebody said, we were under the impression that at the start it was a stressful period, at the end it was a serene life. So normally we take it that because of all these 34, 35, 36 episodes, he reached this. Now it is clear, right from the beginning, he was riveted to this peace. It was not that it was an outcome of this. Please apply your mind. These words again and again.
Swamiji, this is given in the vision of God.
In the Vision of God, in his own introduction, preamble.
Hello, Swamiji.
Yes.
Swamiji, Papa was able to remember all these things and make a note. It's amazing for me to see how yesterday what happened, I don't remember, but how he is able to see so many things. Minute details he is writing is really, I am unable to even, I am wonderstruck.
It is true, but it is the truth.
Swamiji, I had asked you the same question some a year before when you first started in 2020. And is it because he was always in the present?
Consciously going through everything. Actually, it is not he, no. We get confused. You are right. As a person, we will not be able to remember. But when our personality is blessed by him, he makes us to remember minutely. And by narrating it, not only he feels joy, he makes the hearers feel joy, or the readers.
Yes, sir.
Now, having come back to Kadri Hill, he spent some time there. Again, he started. And then, if we remember right, we don't know, because all these things are not conveyed to us by anybody, because at that period, who was there was not there, One thing we know, that he started writing the manuscript of In the Vision of God. That book is still in ashram. But later on we were told that he made a lot of modification. And when Balaji Mama joined him, he started typing it out from the manuscript. Many people would have joined because it is very big compared to In Quest of God. In the Vision of God is and there also, as you said, minutest detail of every incident. Last portion,
Sir, thank you.
1 minute.
Swamiji, நம்ம இன்கொஸ்ட் ஆஃப் காட் தொடர்ந்து இன்விஷன் ஆஃப் காட் கூட அப்படி கொஞ்சம் படிச்சாலும் நல்லா இருக்கும்.
நன்னாதான் இருக்கும், அது சந்தேகம் இல்லை. இதையும் கேட்டுங்கோ. Reverting to the mode of life of Ramdas was leading in the cave. He would rise at about 3 o'clock early in the morning and run down directly to the water tanks for bath. Though the path to the tanks were rough and risky, he would not forego his morning dip even in the darkest night. After bath, he would sit in asana for meditation till daybreak. For some days, his meditation consisted of only the mental repetition of Rama Mantram. Then the mantram having stopped automatically, he beheld a small circular light before his mental vision. This yielded him thrills of delight. This experience having continued for some days, he felt a dazzling light like lightning flashing before his eyes, which ultimately permeated and absorbed him. Now an inexpressible transport of bliss filled every pore of his physical frame. When this state was coming on, he would at the outset become oblivious of his hands and feet, and then gradually his entire body. Lost in this trance state, he would sit for 2 or 3 hours. Still, a subtle awareness of external objects was maintained in this state. A subtle awareness was still there of the external world. Some friends would pay him visits early in the morning when he was absorbed in the trance, and he had at the time a hazy recognition of their presence. He could hear sounds of talk, if any mere sounds without sense or meaning for him. Whenever he fell into the trance, he would feel its grip so firmly that he could not easily shake it off. At the longest, it would be last for more than 3 hours. After returning to body consciousness, he would be engaged in singing to himself some hymns glorifying God and also in the loud recitation of the mantram. In fact, except when conversing, reading or writing, he used to utter the mantram ceaselessly throughout the day. The trance experience brought about another change. Namely, sleep thereafter became a state of half wakefulness or awareness, during which he was filled with pure ecstasy. Sometimes at dead of night, a friend would pay him a surprise visit. Although Ramdas was in a trance state, he could know the friend's approach even when he was at a furlong from the cave. It was during this time that Ramdas, as willed by the Lord, devoted 2 hours past midnight to the work of writing the book In Quest of God. The last days in the cave also saw the trance condition encroaching upon the hours of the day. While no visitors were present, the utterance of the mantram would stop of itself and he would transcend the body consciousness. Here a unique experience is worthy of note. One morning he was standing inside the cave, gazing on the golden orb of the rising sun, and he felt the trance stealing over him, and very soon he was entirely absorbed in it. Some time passed, he came back to the body idea. A casual downward glance disclosed to his view a serpent coiled round his right leg. Its forked tongue was briskly licking his big toe. Everybody is hearing?
Yes, Swamiji.
Ramdas was not affected by the sight. In the same motionless posture, he watched the loving attention of the serpent. A minute or two thus passed, and the reptile slowly unwound itself and crept out of the cave. He recollects to have addressed it thus, "O beloved Ram, why are you thou in such a hurry to go?" The Lord's Leela is really wonderful. All forms are His, and He plays in various ways. The serpent friend conceived such a great love for Ramdas that it would come to see him every morning, consecutively for 3 days, after which it stopped away for good. In accordance with a distinct command from the Lord within, he observed a vow of silence for 7 days. Despite the pressure of friends, he could not break it before the fixed time, for he felt he was quite helpless in the matter. Surely God had complete mastery over his servant. Ramdas had noted a batch of lepers. After feeding the lepers, a Malayali friend came. Okay. So many people came, and then in the earlier stages, this vision was occasionally lost, pulling him down to the old life of diversity with its turmoil of like and dislike, joy and grief. But he would be drawn in again into the silence and calmness of the spirit. A stage was soon reached when this dwelling in the spirit became a permanent and unvarying experience with no more falling off from it. And then a still more exalted state came on. His hitherto inner vision projected outwards. First, a glimpse of this new vision dazzled him off and on. This was the working of divine love. He would feel as though his very soul had expanded like the blossoming of a flower, and by a flash, as it were, enveloped the whole universe, embracing all. This experience granted him a bliss infinitely greater than he had the previous stage. Now it was that Ramdas began to cry out, "Ram is all. It is He as everybody and everything." This condition was for some months coming on and vanishing. When it wore away, he would instinctively run to solitude. With this externalized vision started Ramdas's mission. His fullness and magnificence was revealed to him during his stay in the Kadri cave. And here the experience became more sustained and continuous. The vision of God shone in his eyes, and he could see none but Him in all the objects. Now waves after waves of joy rose in him. He realized that he had attained to a consciousness full of splendor, power, bliss. Ramdas gave up the cave, set forth once again on a wandering life. He gave a touch of the inexpressible bliss he was enjoying to all who came in contact with him. Vast crowds thronged round him wherever he went. Divine love thrilled his entire being at the sight of big multitudes. In a state of perfect ecstasy, he delivered himself out in accents of love and joy.
Swamiji,
Hmm.
Papa has written true vision under the heading of true vision.
Hmm.
Does it mean that he has perfected the vision?
Hmm?
Padmaji, little louder, please.
Does it written true vision in that paragraph, Samadarshan?
Samadarshan is a
Does
true
it
vision.
mean that he has perfected the vision?
He also had Samadarshan previously, but now we find, as Mataji said, there were moments when apparently God made him to feel that he is falling, and immediately he was lifted up. So vision he had, anyway, probably he got he was made to go through certain other experiences also, and then he got stabilized. So now it is again clear why in the heart pourings we find apparently, apparently paradoxical, unable to understand. So now we know that these are the moments when the old mind tries its trick. And at the same time, Ram was watching. Now he said there are two phases that was going on. It was really an entire dedication on one side and a watchful, benevolent protection on the other. Watchful.
God is protecting him, Watchful.
God is there in him in two roles. One in as an entire dedication, one as protecting. Both are done by him only.
Sakshi
No,
Bhava.
no, Swamiji, he is telling God is protecting him. He has surrendered
It was really an entire dedication on one side. God, to whom he had surrendered up his life, was mysteriously influencing his movements and controlling and taking care of him in every way. It was really an entire dedication on one side, God's own. Because when he comes down to the Swami Ramdas part, dedication, and at the same time the watchful, and a watchful, benevolent protection on the other.
Swamiji, Sakshi Bhava.
Eh?
Sakshi Bhava. One side.
Let us try in our own way.
Swamiji, though we don't have like Papa's mind, hearing about Papa's mind makes us feel very happy. Very nice feeling.
That is the first tangible gain.
Very nice. We feel as if we have only got that mind. Short time.
The next moment we are back to square one.
That is later on, at least now.
That is why the leading is taken up very often, because to somehow charge, the moment we are back to our usual field of involvement, all these things are not there. So again, when we come in the evening and listen to this, something is there. So by constantly bringing this dimension, we are trying to somehow allow it to percolate in our daily happenings. We may fail, we may forget. But that is the tangible gain, hearing it often, often, often. And today, how he led us to the whole thing again in his own words. In quest of God also was his own words. But later on, after some time, when he was prompted to make this analysis, make this viewing everything in a retrospect, the perspective, probably in this book it is made clear that in this particular article which we read, that he had taken over before he was pushed on the 27th December. Complete. Though allowing him now and then to think or function as an individual, for all practical purposes, Ram has taken over him. It is not that we have given. Step by step, he pushed him. So the first thing is grace, That also it becomes very clear to us. It's grace, grace, grace. It is not an outcome of anything else. The grace is there, and the grace, through the grace, the mind space is kept empty of the ego, and there God occupies. And then all other activities are going on as per his dictates. Let us see tomorrow again. Anyway, he is making us to go through it again and again and again, so that the real purpose of in-depth study will have its own dent or impact in our spiritual journey. Hari Om. Om Shri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram. Om Shri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram. Om.